All right. What's going on, beautiful people? This is Jamiel Cal-Pin. Sorry it's a little bit late, and apologies because I know some of you all are probably watching. You're probably watching the verses between. Hey, you're probably watching the verses between Omarion and Mario. So I'm not gonna take too much time because I'm gonna get back to watching that as well. But I'm trying to stay committed to reading daily and sticking to. It is late. I'm sorry. But I'm trying to stay committed to this. So reading daily, practicing in public, and sharing this helpful and enriching content with you all. So we're continuing to read Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. And the goal is I just want to finish this chapter. We're in chapter 1. I just want to finish this chapter. Yeah, so it's not that many pages. Finish this chapter, and then I'm going to be done for the day. And hopefully tomorrow I'll be able to do a little bit longer and read a little bit more. But let's get into it. Again, this is Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. And we're continuing from yesterday in chapter 1. You aren't born an artist. And we're picking up from section Take the Right Risks. Once we have embraced who we really are, once we have endeavored to recreate ourselves, what next? How do we take practical steps to start living the life of an artist? Often we think it's the giant leaps that lead to this kind of reinvention, but usually it's a series of small steps. As a new father and lawyer, John Grisham woke up early every morning, went to his office, and wrote a page of his novel. That was his goal. 1 page per day for 365 days in a row, without fail. It took 3 years, but by the end of that time, he had completed the manuscript for his first book, A Time to Kill. The book would eventually go on to be a bestseller, one of many to follow, and in the process, Grisham would invent a new genre, the legal thriller. Soon, he would become one of the world's most successful authors, but he did not do this by getting big. He became a writer by stealing away a little time, 30 minutes to an hour each day. That was it. With a growing family and a new career, it would have been reckless to quit law and become a full-time author. In fact, that wasn't even his goal. He was just writing to see if he could do it. He took one step at a time, and 3 years later, he had a book. More often than not, our creative dreams aren't launched overnight. They are built gradually. When you are in a season of life when you can't dedicate hours a day to your craft, it can feel like you're standing still. But all those times when the odds are overwhelming and the busyness is suffocating, you still have something to give. The effort may seem small and insignificant, but the work adds up. Most of us, however, love a good tale of risk and reward. We get a thrill out of seeing people go all in on chasing their passions. But a study from the University of Wisconsin at Madison demonstrated that this is not the wisest way to take a talent and turn it into a career. In 1994, a pair of researchers set out to measure whether business owners were more successful by staying at their day jobs or by leaving them. The study, conducted by Joseph Ruffy and Ji Feng, lasted until 2008 and followed 5,000 American entrepreneurs who either took the leap and quit their day jobs or kept them. And the results surprised them. Define what we might think that typical entrepreneurial success looks like. In the end, the more cautious entrepreneurs ended up being the more successful ones, whereas the risk takers who quit their jobs early were 33% more likely to fail. Sometimes it's not the big bets that pay off, but the small ones that get you the big win. If you don't have to go all in, don't. Why not start with a smaller risk? Most significant change begins with a simple step, not a giant leap. You don't need to see the whole path to know what your next move is. You just need to take the next right risk. Small changes over time can lead to massive transformation. Most significant change begins with a simple step, not a giant leap. When I began my career as a writer, I interviewed novelist Stephen Pressfield and asked, when does a writer get to call himself a writer? You are when you say you are, he told me. For me, this meant putting the title writer on my business cards and email signature, and telling others this was now my job, even though it wasn't. Before I expected others to take me seriously, I had to start taking myself seriously. It meant getting up every day and treating my writing like a job. This was a risk, of course, because people could laugh at or try to discourage me, but it felt like the right risk. I wasn't quitting my job or taking a giant leap. I was just taking one small step. Over time, these steps add up. It may take years for people to recognize your work and the value of it, but this slow and steady route is often better than a big risk that requires you to either succeed immediately or fail. Sometimes, such failure can be hard to recover from, especially when we place too much pressure on our performance and don't give ourselves enough time to practice and prepare for the life of a professional. If you're waiting for your moment, don't. Start now. If you're wondering if you had to be born to paint or sing or dance, you don't. You just have to choose to become someone else, if the role you're playing isn't the one you wanted. You don't become an artist by moving to New York City without a penny to your name. You become an artist because you decide that's what you're going to be, and then you do the work. It's a small risk, but an important one, and that's always the first risk to take. When John Grisham finished A Time to Kill, he pitched it to 40 different publishers who all rejected the book. Unfazed, he started working on a new novel. At this point, he'd had 3 years of practice and was beginning to understand that the creative life is a series of small steps more than any single giant leap. While working on his second book, Grisham published his first book with a short run of 5,000 copies. When the publisher didn't offer much support, he bought 1,000 copies to market the book on his own. While promoting A Time to Kill, Grisham finished The Firm, which ended up with a major publisher and catapulted his career. It wasn't until he was 2 bestsellers in to his writing career that he felt confident enough to leave his law practice and pursue writing full-time. That's the art of the small bet. This was what Adrian Cardenas did too. Though he wanted to quit baseball immediately, his mother told him to invest the money he'd made in some property and to make a more gradual transition. The result was a lasting career in art instead of a brief one. The first step to doing creative work is just that, a step, not a leap or an epiphany. Just one small decision that leads to the next one. Sure, some people may risk it all and end up winning, but those are the exceptions to the rule, and that kind of success is often short-lived. The alternative, doing something so small and gradual that it almost looks like you're doing nothing, often leads to much more sustainable success. You can do extraordinary things when you are patiently persistent. Orbit the hairball. In various seasons of life, we will encounter systems that may call us to compromise our true selves. When this happens, we must remember that we are never done becoming who we are, and these, too, are opportunities to be creative. For 17 years, Gordon McKenzie was a member of Hallmark's contemporary design team, which he called an unruly but prodigiously productive stepchild of a department. Excuse me. This was a division that made money with oddball, humorous products that didn't quite fit into the ethos of Hallmark as a respectable seller of greeting cards. Gordon loved the contemporary design team. It broke just enough rules to keep things interesting, and he would have happily stayed there. But then the unexpected happened. In 1979, Hallmark's competitor, American Greetings, landed a strawberry shortcake licensing deal. The influx of money for their rival had Hallmark executives shifting company resources toward licensing opportunities, and Gordon was reassigned to the hastily thrown together Hallmark Properties division. Caught up in the desire to be a high-producing corporate businessman, he pursued money, prestige, and power. He even did the unthinkable and bought a suit. The promise of prestige clouded Gordon's artistic sensibilities, and before long, he had compromised quality for a paycheck, and he knew it. Something had to change. The solution came from his own imagination, a made-up department that would be an escape from the toxic work environment he'd created for himself. It would be a place where he and his creative peers could thumb their noses at bureaucracy, greed, and the status quo. Translating his vision into a one-page, handwritten proposal, he turned it into a lunchtime pitch to the vice president of creative. Unsure if the VP would go for it, Gordon had to at least try, but by the end of the meal, his boss said, "We've got to do it." The humor workshop was born, and Gordon's team of 12 set out to operate as no department in the organization ever had. Pretending to pull their money to start a studio in which Hallmark was no longer an employer but a client, the team felt free to create however they wanted. It became a creative paradise for team members, a place where everyone experienced a rebirth within a culture that had grown antagonistic to creative work. After 3 years, Gordon was invited back to the corporate headquarters, or the big gray place, as he called it, where he was given an opportunity to take on a new but unclear role. There was one piece, however, that made the offer irresistible. He could write his own job description. Gordon accepted the position and gave himself the new and unheard of job title, Creative Paradox. The title, as well as the position, was a complete fabrication. It came with no job description and no parameters whatsoever. For some, such freedom would have been crippling, but Gordon found it liberating. His office became an idea chamber where he would listen to people's ideas and affirm the ones he liked. At Hallmark, word began to spread that people could take their ideas to the Creative Paradox, and because no one knew where the title sat on the corporate hierarchy, everyone assumed he had the authority to approve any idea that came across his desk. In meetings, when people heard that a certain project had received the Creative Paradox approval, people were afraid to disagree with it. The truth was that Gordon had no authority at all. But, he recalled, as soon as they assumed I had a certain amount of power, I had it. For the last 3 of his 30 years at Hallmark, Gordon spent his time as the Creative Paradox. With such a vague title, he was able to orbit the bureaucratic mess, making up new rules as he went. They were the most enriching, fruitful, productive, joy-filled years of my entire career, he said. Talk about a paradox. In his book, Gordon describes his experience at Hallmark as an exercise in orbiting the giant hairball. The analogy is an apt one for creatives who feel constrained by the systems that surround them. On one hand, we all have the freedom to fly off into our own orbits and be completely independent from the bureaucracies of the world. But when we do this, we end up alone and ineffective in our work, never having the impact we want. On the other hand, we can do what Gordon did and learn to make the most of these opportunities, reinventing ourselves along the way when the system threatens to rob us of our true selves. The thriving artist knows how to maneuver these hairballs, never becoming a part of them, but using the system to do better work. You're never done becoming yourself. Over the course of a lifetime, we may find ourselves facing new challenges at every turn, and when we do, we must remember that we are never done becoming who we are. We don't make meaningful art through lateral moves, but by constantly challenging ourselves to new heights. We cannot create great art without continuing to create ourselves. This work is a process of continuous reinvention. We don't just do it once. It is a journey of becoming, one in which we never fully arrive. We are all apprentices in a craft where no one ever becomes a master, Hemingway mused. Ultimately, creativity is what allowed me to get to the major leagues, Adrian Cardines told me, but it also took me away from the game, because the passion to do those other things trumped playing in the major leagues. Creativity takes you in, and then out, and then back in again. It removes you from the system that is encumbering you, gives you a new set of skills, and brings you back to the place you left, this time empowered with a new vision to shape it. This is what happened when Gordon MacKenzie kept reinventing himself, and each reinvention allowed him to do better work than before. If we want to find our own creative callings, we must be willing to do the same. Our work begins with a decision. Will we assume the role we've been given, or realize it's never too late to become who we are? Life is not fixed. Things are always changing. We are either becoming more of our true selves or drifting into a false self. In the new Renaissance, we get to start over. We get to reinvent and recreate ourselves as much as is necessary, without sticking to a particular path for too long if it doesn't suit our creative needs. Our first job as artists, then, is to venture out, away from what we think we know in search of the new and unexplored. Great artists do this their entire lives, never staying stuck in a single style, even when it brings wealth and fame. We must always be striving to reinvent ourselves, continuing to build on who we are and what we've done. This is the path that Adrian Cardenas is now on. Today, the athlete turned artist loves baseball more than ever, but as a hobby. As a student in film school, he's developing his skills to bring his parents' story to the big screen, an opportunity that would never have presented itself had he kept playing baseball. He had to leave the familiar, and through a series of gradual changes, he is now becoming a truer version of himself. The first step in letting go of the starving artist mentality is to let go of who we think we are or must be, even if we have no idea what new identity awaits us. What's out there, however scary it may be, is almost certainly better than staying where we are now. Art is always found on the fringes, at the edge of our discomfort where true change occurs. It's never too late to start living a new story. You just have to become who you are, taking small steps along the way. All right, that was the end of chapter 1 of Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. Yay! Like I mentioned earlier, probably going to get off of this and join my wife in continuing to watch the verses between Omarion and Mario, because it's been interesting so far. But thank you all for tuning in and watching as I practice in public. I want to encourage you to do the same. Whatever your thing is, whatever creative, artistic thing is that you're trying to do, whatever idea, even if it's entrepreneurial or whatever, even if it's just a hobby, find some time to make room for creativity in your life. And on my podcast, do make something. I encourage black men to find time to have an emotional release valve, because oftentimes we carry a lot of stuff in our minds and in our hearts, but we need to release it so that we can be more present for ourselves, more present for those we care about, and so that we can be more effective at living for God's glory and for the good of others. But again, thank you all as I continue to read, share, and practice in public. I hope you all have a great night, and I will be back tomorrow to continue reading the book, Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins. Make sure to go get you a copy if you're interested in the book. It's available everywhere, Amazon and stuff like that. I will get a link at some point, maybe Amazon affiliate link for these books, because I plan on continuing to read and share these different content and nonfiction material with you all, because I think we all can keep growing, and might as well share what I'm already reading with you all. But yes, have a good night, stay safe, and I will see you all, Lord willing, tomorrow. See ya.